After having sailed from Oslo, Norway, with stops down along the Swedish west coast, in the evening of day 11 we got the Kullen lighthouse up on our port side. This lighthouse is the strongest one in Scandinavia and can be seen as far as 27 nautical miles away. Kullen also marks the entrance to the Öresund Strait, which separates Sweden and Denmark. Seeing Kullen always gives me the feeling of having sailed far, but at this time also a bittersweet feeling that we soon would have to turn back. We moored for the night in a small town called Viken on the Swedish side, and we could look over the strait to the Danish side and the Kronborg castle on the horizon. For a couple of days we did what sailors often do, wait for the weather to calm down. As a nice end to our stay in Sweden, we got a visit from some friends who live nearby, and on day 13 we started to sail over to Helsingør. The Öresund Strait, which connects the North Sea with the Baltic Sea, is one of the most heavily trafficked waterways in the world. You can either cross the strait with a bridge between Malmö and Copenhagen, or you can take a short ferry ride going between Helsingborg on the Swedish side and Helsingør on the Danish side. As we got closer to Helsingør, the Kronborg castle grew bigger and bigger, best known for presumably being the castle that Shakespeare had in mind for his famous play Hamlet. Suddenly, we started hearing splashing and blowing sounds around us, and it turned out a pod of dolphins had come to swim with us. Wow! After tying up in the guest harbor, it was time to hoist the Danish courtesy flag. We got a visit from some good Danish friends and spent the day exploring the castle and the surroundings. We watched the current down in the strait running fast, and a line of fishermen were catching nice-sized mackerels. I guess it explains the dolphins earlier in the day. Denmark is a country of beautiful beaches, and that is where we chose to spend our first and last evening in Helsingør before it was time to head north again the next day. It's early morning, 6 o'clock, but we've been out for an hour already. Today we are saying goodbye to Helsingør, and we're sailing along the Danish coast here now, and we are aiming for the island of Anholt, where we are supposed to arrive in roughly 10 to 12 hours. It's a pretty good wind today. It's south southwesterly wind blowing at around 14 knots, so I think it's going to be a very enjoyable day of sailing. It turned out to be a pretty grey day, and except for some big ships over in the shipping lane and this one sailboat, we did not see much except for ocean all around us. We enjoyed plenty of hot chocolate though, and for lunch we had open-faced sandwiches on fresh Danish rye bread. Finally, after 13 hours at sea, we had the Anholt island coming up on our starboard side. We had never been at Anholt this time of the year before, so we were not sure what to expect. It turned out, however, that there are 2 weeks every year when the harbor is completely packed, and that happened to be now. Boats were crammed together, sometimes in creative ways, and we ended up longside along the dock as boat number 5 of a total of 6. By tying up longside to the dock, it means we are all tied up to each other, as you can see in this illustration. This arrangement leads to that whenever someone is arriving or someone is leaving in the morning, all the other boats need to move accordingly. It's actually a fun everyday event, especially to observe Swedes, Danes, Norwegians and Germans trying to communicate together in 5 different languages, including some English. It usually goes without a hitch though, and it's a great way to get to know your neighbor. However, sometimes there is some drama, like this boat hitting ground. Luckily, the harbor master came and pushed him off. The Unholt island is 7 miles long and about 4 miles wide. There are 2 villages with about 150 permanent residents, but during the summer season, from the end of June to the first half of August, as many as 50,000 people visit, transforming the otherwise sleepy island to a busy place with restaurants and shops open. There are not many cars on the island, and the best way to explore is on a rental bike. This island is just beautiful, and we rented bikes and we're going to go out and explore, and it's just beautiful scenery. There's pine forest, there's a desert, and they also have pretty good wienerbrød, Danish bread. We started by biking out to a beach on the east side of the island. We enjoyed some fresh lemonade while enjoying the sun, the sand, the warm wind and the ocean. When it was time for lunch, we biked into the Anholt town. A cute little place where the locals were selling various things along the road, like for instance Anholt potatoes picked the same day. We stopped by the island church with ships hanging from the ceiling, possibly to show gratitude for the sailors returning from sea. As we got hungry, we had some smoked shrimps and salmon from the local fish store. The eastern part of the island has an area named Ørkenen, the desert. It's not a true desert, but a fairly flat shrubland with small sandy hills shaped by the wind. This area has never been cultivated, so the topography is more or less the same as it was 10,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age. The desertification here was caused by deforestation during the Napoleonic Wars when they needed large amounts of timber to build ships. We went for a walk to enjoy the calm ambience, with only the sound of grasshoppers, the wind, and the ocean far away.
Who's a good guy? Huh?
We had planned to stay 2 nights at Anholt, but we ended up staying 4. We just couldn't leave this place. On the morning of day 18, we motored out of the Anholt harbor. For the first time during the trip, we now felt that we were on our way home and that the sailing adventure was coming to an end. But before that, there were still some nautical miles left to cover. On this day, we were going to sail over to the Swedish coast, a long day of sailing crossing the Strait of Kattegat. We started with a good wind coming from the southwest. About midday, we got the wind straight from behind, so we sailed wing on wing. Notice the preventer rope going from the back of the boom and forward. This keeps the boom in place so that it won't flip across the cockpit and hit any heads. Later in the day, the southern wind picked up and we had some enjoyable hours of sailing before reaching the Swedish coast in the late evening. We were not planning on spending a lot of time along the Swedish coast, so after a night on anchor, a night on buoy, and an evening of an epic sunset, we sailed some long days until we reached the Swedish island of Koster just before the Norwegian border. Koster consists of 2 larger main islands, and on the south side there are hundreds of smaller islands and rocks providing good protection against the ocean waves. Here and there you find areas well suited for tying up and spending the night. It's a perfect example of what we in Norwegian call uthavn, out harbor. A typical way to moor here is longside along the rocks. You basically find a fairly steep rock wall with a good depth under the water. You put a lot of fenders out and pull some ropes on land. To be able to fasten the ropes, you can tie them around the rock, or if there are no rocks nearby, you can hammer in some wedges. We enjoyed exploring these small islands, giving a reminder of how the glaciers once inhabited these lands and carved out this landscape as they started to retract at the end of the Ice Age. A flock of sheep are spending the summers here, cutting the grass and socializing with the sailors. We knew the end of our trip was nearing, and so we installed ourselves for a final West Coast sunset. We brought our foldable chairs, a wool blanket, and a thermos of hot chocolate, and sat there watching the sun disappearing under the horizon and reminiscing back to a great sailing adventure. Ending the trip on Koster would have been perfect, but we still had one more day of sailing to reach our home harbor in Oslo. And if you look carefully under the cloud on the right, you can see the shape of the other Oslo fjord. And before we knew it, we were cruising up the fjord with a nice southerly wind. And after a long day at sea, the sun set, and just before midnight we reached Oslo.